Good morning, this is Dominic with TheBackVlog. My face looks pretty moody because it's a dreary day outside. I just took Robin out and my shirt is probably wet. So I just finished the hulking masterpiece that is Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. And actually, before I start this, let me go get my phone because I do have stuff written down so I'm not at a complete loss as to what to talk about. One moment. So I did take a few notes about like my own personal thoughts before I go into like the deeper philosophical stuff that everybody else has already talked about and that I won't really be able to add to the conversation because I don't have the life experience to do so, nor the wisdom or intelligence. Firstly, Fyodor Pavlovich, she's about to drink my coffee. The patriarch of the book, of the Karamazov family. I think my fan casting for him would be Daniel Day-Lewis, but if he was like reprising his role from There Will Be Blood as Daniel Plainview, because I can't not see Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov with all of his toxic patriarchal glory as the drunkard oil baron. I just thought that was funny. It amazes me that these characters let each other talk as much as they do. Like there are several times where, you know, characters will just go on pages worth of monologues. It's very Shakespearean. You know, in this book, you have an old man literally giving his entire life story. You have characters who wrote entire like versions of their own divine comedy. I'm gonna get her a quieter toy. You have characters discussing their evil master plan. Let me scoot in a little bit. Yeah, a lot of these characters just talk and talk. And you know, the things they say are very intriguing and very insightful and philosophical, but like, it's astonishing to me that the people that they are talking to, because a lot of these conversations are like in the middle of like heated arguments and stuff, that these characters are like cool-headed enough to like just hold their tongue and let the other character speak. It's astonishing to me. You don't get that nowadays. Ivan's treatise on the division and responsibilities between state and church, I felt was really interesting. This was a note that I had taken early on in the reading of this book, which was like 2 months ago. It took me 2 months to read this thing, and that was with an audiobook, which I guess I'll talk about too. But it's really interesting, and I'm not really well versed in theological philosophy at all. So a lot of the God stuff went over my head in this book, which is like kind of the point of the book. And it wasn't until I did like research on like people's analysis of the book that I kind of like had an understanding and I could see like what Dostoevsky was doing. And now that I know, like I can't wait to go back and read this thing. Maybe whenever I have like a decade or two more onto my life. Yeah, what Ivan was saying, I felt was really interesting because one of his big character things is that he has this piece in this philosophical magazine, and he was talking about the church and the state, but not the ideals that they represent, but more the objective function that they serve in society. Because he was talking about like whenever a criminal commits a crime, you know, the state's version of reprimand is assuming it's not like, you know, a murder. I mean, I guess it is representative of a murder, considering what happens to Dmitri at the end. And that's another thing I go into. I just kind of spoiled the end of this 200-year-old book, but I'll talk about that in a little bit too. But, whenever, even if a person like murders, their punishment is merely exile, and I guess labor. But, that doesn't really teach a criminal anything. That just teaches them, or that just tells them that, like, you can get away scot-free. Just don't expect to stay here anymore. But, the way the church approaches a crime like that is basically the threat that you will serve eternal damnation if you do not confess your sins and relinquish yourself of them. And I think that's really interesting. Like, the state is like a very tangible punishment, but the church is more of an ethereal, open-ended punishment that nobody can really grasp the consequences of. And I don't know, I think that was really interesting. I think it was also interesting, and it's actually funny because I'm watching Legend of the Galactic Heroes right now, the second season, and they kind of touch on this topic too, but the fact that a society kind of needs a religion in order to function properly. Without religion, society does not have a moral compass and does not have a conception of right and wrong. And, another common thing in this book is that, without religion, every action is virtuous, no matter how good or evil. At least that's how I understood it to be. This thing is really Shakespearean in the way that, for multiple reasons. You have you have a parricide, you have deep psychological delvings into the characters, each individual character, but also in terms of the narrative elements that it uses, because and I haven't read a lot of Shakespeare, but from the ones I have read and can remember, you always have, like, I guess the fool or something, or like some sort of narrator come out at the beginning of the show and basically say what the show is going to be about. And I guess, the purpose or the function of that back in the day in Shakespeare times was to keep the audience engaged and kind of give them an idea of what they were about to see. It was the hook for Shakespeare plays, and Dostoevsky employs this technique as well. It's easy to forget that this book is kind of actually being written in the first-person perspective, because it's being written in the perspective of, I guess, a novelist, I think, in the monastery, or just the town. I don't remember if he was like a monk or not, but yeah, this book is like, in universe, it's being written by a novelist, and he is like accounting for the events that had taken place, which, you kind of have to extend your disbelief a little bit, because, as I said before, when these characters just go on and talk for pages, this is exact dialogue that he's reciting, but then you get to like the court scenes at the end, and he's basically like, I don't really remember like how everything went down, and it's beyond me how any of this legal proceeding stuff works anyway, but this is like the general gist of it. But then he still goes on for pages and pages. So yeah, I found it a little bit funny in that regard. I think actually there are, despite the very Russian drama and, very exciting subject matter, in multiple regards, there's actually a decent bit of comedy in this too. Like there are some scenes in this book that actually like made me laugh out loud. I think the way that Dostoevsky employs comedy, I guess it is like black comedy, but like he employs comedy into these things that like are really disparaging, and like these disparaging scenes, and like these hopeless scenes, it has a comedic aspect to it. I'm going into spoilers because this book came out in 1888, I think. So you should read it. It is really heavy and complicated. But I definitely think everybody should read it. But some of the scenes that come to mind when I think of the comedy in this book are like whenever the elder Zalsima dies, and like how the author of the book is going into detail about how bad his body smelled, and after how short amount of time he died that his body started smelling, and it was talking about, and I guess like that was kind of like an interesting philosophical concept too, about the elder being a sensualist and kind of being a foil to Alyosha, one of the Karamazov brothers, who is also a sensualist. But the author was saying that the elder's body started to smell so quickly, and the decomposition of his body was more rapid than it usually would be because of the life of sin that he lived on Earth. And like, I don't know, it just kept like, it was just talking about like how bad his body stank, and like all the shit talking that all the townspeople were doing. I don't know, I just found it really funny despite the fact that it was very dark. There's also the scene where Dmitri, this is like when he's trying to get the money to pay off his fiance towards the end of the book. And by towards the end of the book, I mean like the last 300 pages or so. But he goes to Miss Holokov's house, and he's trying to like ask for money, but she just won't pick up on the fact that he's asking for money. So he's like, I need 3,000 right now. And she's like talking about like going to the gold mines and how you can like make a fortune there. And Dmitri just keeps saying like, I need 3,000. And then, she finally puts two and two together, and she's like, oh, you mean 3,000 rubles? I don't have any money, dude. Get out of here. Those are just the two that came to my head, but there's definitely more comedy. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about the events of this book, because the narrative roller coaster that this thing takes you on is ridiculous. Obviously it's massive, but it really felt like I was watching like an epic film or like a really good TV show. This isn't like the first big book I read. Like I also read, I guess I'll go with Infinite Jest because that's like the biggest. And I've read it also, but I kind of want to talk about Infinite Jest a little bit more, because the way that book is structured is like very non-linear, and it's definitely like it's hard to follow. But this is obviously like a very linear story, and the plot beats and the character arcs are so rich and deep, and it's easy to follow, but also hard just because of the sheer amount of information there is. I thought it was stellar. I guess I will talk more about the philosophical elements that are way beyond my head. And this is just like regurgitating several analyses that I read and watched. But one of the big themes in this book is, if there is a God, why do bad things happen to good people or innocent people? And it just talks about how, like, if there was a God, why did he give humans the free will to act or to inflict harm upon others? there's a short story. It's like a short story embedded into the grand narrative of the book, called The Grand Inquisitor, which is like an epic poem that that Ivan kind of came up with, that he's like telling to Alyosha. I'm not really going to go into the plot events of that story, but that is like the crux of the philosophical core of the book. That is the keystone to understanding the whole thing. Dostoevsky gives a very good, despite being a Christian himself, he gives possibly the best argument for atheism, which is, what I said, like, why do humans have free will? Because if God was perfect, and made people in his image and everything, like, they should be perfect too. But the fact that they have free will kind of prevents that perfection. He's putting this argument into very, very thought out words, but Alyosha's point of view, and I guess Dostoevsky's point of view as well, is that faith in God cannot merely be elaborated on with just words. You need to act as well. The argument against atheism is acts of love, because I guess free will, you can inflict harm upon others, but you can also love people with that free will too. And I don't know, it is really deep. I haven't read the Bible or anything, and I haven't read much Shakespeare. And those are like the two things that you need in order to like understand this book. But I would love to come to this thing again, after I have more of that knowledge and more life experience under my belt. Another thing that this delves into, which is actually funny because I just did my Yakuza 6 video. This is another piece of art that goes into the stakes of fatherhood. One of the core aspects of understanding this book as well is understanding Dostoevsky's personal life, and the catalyst that brought this book to fruition is the death of his son. So this book was kind of, it was an insightful journey for him, going into his feelings about losing his son, his very young son. I believe he was 3 when he died. And he was talking about how, in the book, he's talking about how the way to make society better is to, as a father, love your children more. And, the bad stuff that happens in this book happens because of the negligence and hatred that the patriarch inflicted upon his children. And I think that theme, an act of love, kind of molds into as well, because you have these themes of fatherhood, and you have these themes of free will and faith, and I think those things kind of like coincide together, because had Fyodor Pavlovich used his free will to love his children, and had other fathers just anywhere throughout time use their free will to love their children, maybe the world would be a better place. And I think that's a really powerful message. And Dostoevsky was really onto something when he was pondering that. This thing is a masterpiece. This thing needs to be read by everybody. I don't know much about this translation. And the audiobook that I was listening to from the library, because I was listening to the audiobook when I didn't have a chance to actually read the book. So like whenever I would like, whenever I would go back to the book, I would like find where I'm at in the audiobook and just kind of like skip to it, which I know is probably sacrilege. I just wanted to get the gist of the plot though. There were two separate translations, and the audiobook was narrated by a very annoying British dude, and I was not a fan of that. And I thought it was really funny because I checked out the audiobook from the library, and there were 14 discs on it, and I was like ramping up the end of the 14 discs, and I'm only like halfway through it, and like in the book at this point, I'm like, what's going on here? Like, is this audiobook like incomplete or something? Like, if I have to read it from the book, like I'll finish it in the book, but like that's like the whole like second half of the book. And then I remembered when I checked it out at the library, there were 2 copies of it, and I thought there were just 2 copies of the same thing, but then I started thinking, I was like, that second copy might have actually been a part 2 of this audiobook. So I went back to the library, and it was a part 2, and I was like, oh. So, yeah, I thought that was funny. That was my audiobook story with this book. But yeah, The Brothers Karamazov, written by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Possibly the oldest novel I have ever read, not the oldest thing I have ever read, because, I mean, I read Art of War earlier this year. I've read The Divine Comedy. I think Shakespeare is older than, I guess Shakespeare would be older than this. I've read some Sophocles stuff. But in terms of novels, this is probably the oldest novel I have ever read. And I'm looking forward to reading more classics like this in the future. So yeah. That's my conclusion.